For the last part of this chapter, we're going to talk very briefly about ethics in psychological research. Now, we could spend forever, you could take an entire class on ethics in research. But because we only have a very small amount of time to cover this, we're just going to hit the most important points about ethics. But I want you to be aware that there is so much more to this topic that could be covered, and if you're interested in it, it's something that you can always look into or that we can chat about maybe at a different time. But when we talk about ethics, we're talking about a set of general principles that determine how people should be educated, treated, and respected when they participate in any kind of study. Now, most of the texts in psychology will focus on ethics as they relate to human subjects. I just want to also make you aware that we can have a separate, entirely long discussion on ethical principles in using non-human animals as research subjects. There are just as many rules and regulations on that side of things as well, but because psychology tends to focus on human participants, that's going to be the main focus of our discussion today. Again, just making you aware of what is out there, even though we only get a small time to discuss it in the format for this course. So for our general ethical principles, again, specifically when studying humans, we focus on five specific principles. The first of these principles is the principle of beneficence and non-malfeasance. And this is basically saying that you should treat people in ways that benefit them, make sure that you don't cause undue suffering, and that you conduct research that will in some way benefit society. Our second principle is that of fidelity and responsibility, which is basically saying that you should establish relationships of trust with those that you work with and basically maintain professional behavior. So be responsible and respectable and professional. For our third principle, we have integrity, which is where you strive to be accurate, truthful, and honest as a researcher, as a teacher, or as a practitioner. Basically, having integrity. Our fourth principle is justice, and this is where you strive to treat all groups of people fairly. So make sure that you're sampling research participants from the same populations that will benefit from this research, and be aware of and actively go against biases. So try and avoid biases in your research and be fair, support justice within your work. And then our last principle is respect for people's rights and dignity. Now, this is sort of a bigger one. So this recognizes that people are autonomous agents. So everybody has their own ability to make choices and have free will. So we want to protect people's rights, including their right to privacy. So we want to have them give consent for participating in research or receiving treatment, and we want to have them be treated confidentially so their information isn't shared. No one knows that they were part of the research unless they tell us that they want someone to know. Now, all of these principles will usually be evaluated by some kind of internal review board or an IRB. And so these internal boards are usually conducted within the institution that you're conducting research at. So each university will have one of these IRBs, or maybe more than one. These IRBs will review and assess if a research project meets all of these principles, if it can be carried out in a way that meets all of these rules. So they do things like check whether your study makes use of sound research design. Is it a good experiment that's worth conducting? They want to evaluate what risks are associated with participation in the study and make sure that you minimize those risks and that they are completely reasonable. They want to ensure that the benefits for conducting this research outweigh any potential risks that can't be minimized. And they want to make sure that all participants are able to make an informed decision to actually participate in the study, and that they know that that decision to participate can be withdrawn at any time without any consequence. So these boards make sure that there are safeguards in place to protect the well-being of the participants, as well as to protect their privacy and confidentiality. So there's lots of stuff going on there that are governed by these internal review boards to carry out these very important ethical principles. Now, there are some special considerations to keep in mind when we think about ethics. So, there are some groups and some participants who may not be able to legally give informed consent. So, children may not be able to fully grasp the concepts and the risks associated with participating. So they can't give informed consent. There are other special populations that also need to be considered. So maybe those with intellectual disabilities or people who might feel pressured to participate in research. So individuals like prisoners. We have to take extra special care to make sure that they don't feel coerced into participating. And so one thing that might happen if you're working with one of these groups is that you get informed consent from either a parent or guardian that's responsible for the individual that can't make the decision themselves. And you might also have to get assent or agreement from that participant before you proceed. Another thing to keep in mind is the fact that the process of receiving informed consent might actually involve telling the participants what the study is about and can then lead to them changing their behaviors. So that can be problematic. So in some cases, you'll see situations like deception. So you might not reveal the true nature of a study until after they've participated. So if that internal review board has deemed it necessary to allow this deception to occur, you can go through that process, and then there's usually something called sort of a debriefing at the end, where they will explain what was falsified at the beginning, what deception was employed, and what actually happened. So that debriefing is sort of a follow-up and important ending to go along with informed consent so that people know what happened, even if you had to withhold some information to ensure that their behavior was normal.